Nia had always believed that love meant safety, trust, and a shared life built together. In Lusaka, she and her husband, Tay, had created a home full of memories, laughter, and dreams. She had worked quietly, managing the house, paying bills, supporting his business, and making their life comfortable. She thought all of it mattered, that it was enough to earn respect and kindness. But that night, everything shattered. The sky had opened up in a furious storm, rain lashing against the streets, wind tugging at umbrellas, and thunder rolling overhead. Inside their small home, a trivial argument had spiraled out of control. Tay's voice rose, sharp and cruel, his words cutting deeper than any knife. Without warning, he grabbed her coat, slammed open the door, and shoved her out into the storm. Nia stumbled, drenched, her hair plastered to her face, water soaking through her clothes. The cold rain stung her skin, and the muddy street clung to her shoes. From the windows nearby, neighbors peeked out, eyes wide in disbelief. Some whispered, some just stared, frozen in shock. Nia's humiliation was visible to everyone. The woman who had quietly built a life now standing in the rain, rejected and powerless. Her heart pounded, not just from the cold, but from the betrayal, the sheer disbelief that someone she had loved so completely could treat her this way. In that moment, soaked and trembling, Nia realized that life could change in an instant, and that the world she knew had vanished along with the storm. Nia walked through the slick streets of Lusaka, rain soaking her clothes and dripping into her shoes. Her small bag, the only thing she had taken with her, pressed against her chest. Each step squelched in the puddles, but she barely noticed. Her mind was too heavy, replaying everything that had just happened. How had it come to this? How had someone she loved, someone she had trusted with her entire heart, thrown her out into the storm like she was nothing? Memories of years spent caring for their life together filled her head. She remembered the nights she stayed up balancing bills while Tay slept, the mornings she prepared breakfast even when she had barely slept, the afternoons she spent helping with his business plan, making sure everything ran smoothly. She had sacrificed so much, often quietly, never asking for thanks, believing that love was enough. But that belief now felt like a cruel joke. Every effort, every small kindness, every ounce of patience had been met with anger, impatience, and now betrayal. As she walked, the rain mixed with the tears she could no longer hold back. The streets seemed endless, unfamiliar despite having walked them countless times. She felt stripped bare, not just by the storm but by the realization that the life she had built was fragile, dependent on someone who didn't value it, or her. Questions swirled in her mind, each one sharper than the last. Was she not enough? Was her love meaningless? How had her world turned so cold so fast? Yet even in the despair, a tiny ember of determination flickered. Nia could feel it, buried beneath the hurt and humiliation. She refused to let herself be entirely crushed by this moment, though she didn't yet know how. She clutched her bag tighter, the weight of it somehow grounding her. Each step through the muddy puddles became a small act of defiance, a quiet promise to herself that she would find a way forward, even if the road was uncertain and the night dark. The rain continued to pour, drenching her, washing away the comfort of home, the illusions of love, and the sense of security she once took for granted. Nia's pride was battered, her heart raw, but in the midst of that storm, she began to understand something she hadn't realized before. Strength didn't always come from others, and sometimes the only person you could rely on was yourself. Nia kept walking, one wet, heavy step after another, her mind spinning but her resolve slowly solidifying. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside her, yet she knew that eventually the clouds would pass. And when they did, she wanted to be ready, not broken, not defeated, but alive, aware, and ready to reclaim what life had taken from her. Nia trudged along the wet streets, her clothes clinging to her, water running down her face, mixing with the tears she could no longer hold back. Her small bag felt heavier than ever, as if it carried not just her few belongings, but the weight of every betrayal, every harsh word, every disappointment. Her body ached, her feet were sore, and yet she kept moving, not knowing exactly where she was going. The storm seemed endless, but even in the pouring rain, a memory stirred inside her, a letter from her late grandmother, Amina. She had found it months earlier, tucked away in an old wooden box among photographs and keepsakes. The handwriting was familiar, elegant, and flowing, and the words had seemed almost like a puzzle at the time. Amina had written about family, about legacy, about remembering where one comes from. And then there was the hint of something more, a secret inheritance in Kitwe, a mansion that had been passed down through generations, hidden away, waiting for the rightful heir. Nia had always thought it was a story, an old family tale meant to inspire pride and curiosity. But now, soaked and exhausted, the thought of it ignited a spark she hadn't felt in hours, or maybe days. Clutching her bag, Nia pressed the memory of the letter to her heart, imagining her grandmother's kind eyes, her warm smile. She could almost hear her voice, calm and certain, reminding her that even when life seemed cruel and unfair, there was always a path forward if you were brave enough to find it. That letter had seemed like a whisper of hope then, but now it felt like a lifeline. Her mind raced with possibilities. Could it be real? Could this mansion, this inheritance, really be hers? Could it change everything? Nia lifted her head, the rain plastering her hair to her face, and took a deep breath. For the first time since Tay had thrown her out, she felt something besides fear and despair. She felt possibility. It wasn't just a dream. It was a direction, a goal, a reason to keep moving, to keep fighting, to keep believing in herself when the world seemed determined to break her. With renewed determination, she adjusted the strap of her bag and squared her shoulders. The streets of Lusaka blurred past her as she imagined Kitwe, the mansion, the hidden rooms, the legacy waiting for her. She didn't know what exactly lay ahead, but she knew one thing for certain: she wasn't finished yet. Whatever storm had knocked her down, she would rise. The letter was more than paper. It was a promise, a secret map to reclaiming her life, and she was ready to follow it. Nia's steps grew steadier, her resolve clearer. The rain continued to fall, but now it felt different, like a cleansing, washing away despair and leaving a determination she hadn't realized she possessed. She was heading toward something greater, and for the first time since the betrayal, hope felt real. Nia's legs ached from the long journey, her shoes caked in mud, her bag still clutched tightly to her chest. The storm had finally eased, leaving behind the smell of wet earth and the soft drip of rain from the trees. Kitwe spread out before her, quiet and almost surreal, as if the city itself had paused to let her catch her breath. But her eyes were fixed on one thing: the gates. The grand mansion that her grandmother's letter had promised, the place that might hold the answers and the future she had been searching for. As she approached, the gates loomed tall and imposing, dark metal twisted into intricate patterns, silent sentinels guarding the secrets inside. Nia hesitated for a moment, heart pounding, a mixture of awe, fear, and hope swirling in her chest. Memories of Tay flooded her mind, his arrogance, his belief that he could control her, his cruelty that had left her shivering in the rain. He had thought her life could be dictated, her choices taken from her, her spirit broken. But here she was, soaked and exhausted, yet walking steadily towards something that could change everything. Then, just as she reached the entrance, something remarkable happened. The gates slowly creaked open on their own, as if recognizing her presence, her right to be there. Nia froze, her hand still gripping the bag, eyes wide. She blinked, unsure if it was her imagination, a trick of the light, or something more. The mansion, her grandmother's legacy, seemed to be welcoming her, acknowledging that she was the one it had been waiting for. The metal swung wide, revealing a long driveway lined with ancient trees, their branches dripping with rainwater, leaves glistening in the soft afternoon light. A shiver ran down Nia's spine, not from cold but from the strange, thrilling certainty that she was in the right place. Each step up the driveway felt heavier with anticipation but lighter with purpose. The mansion itself was imposing, its stone walls tall and elegant, windows reflecting the cloudy sky like watchful eyes. But there was a sense of belonging, of history, of home, that made her chest tighten. She could almost hear whispers from the past, her grandmother's voice mingling with the wind, telling her she had arrived, that her journey was just beginning. For the first time in what felt like forever, Nia felt a flicker of power inside her. She had been cast out, humiliated, and betrayed, but here she was, walking into a space that had always belonged to her. The gates might have been closed to the world, but they were open to her, and that made all the difference. She took a deep breath, adjusted her bag, and stepped forward, ready to uncover the mansion's secrets and claim what was rightfully hers. Every drop of rain that had fallen on her seemed to wash away the fear, leaving only courage and determination. Nia had reached the gates, but this was just the beginning. Nia stepped through the grand doors, her heart racing with a mix of excitement and nerves. The foyer was vast, filled with polished wood and gleaming floors, sunlight streaming through tall windows and casting patterns on the wall. The smell of old wood and faint dust filled the air, comforting and strange at the same time. She had imagined this place in her mind for months, but seeing it in person was different. It felt alive, as if the mansion itself was breathing, waiting for her to uncover its secret. She began to explore cautiously, her footsteps echoing through empty halls. Every room seemed to tell a story. Portraits of ancestors lined the walls, their eyes following her as if silently acknowledging her arrival. Elegant furniture covered in sheets hinted at years of careful preservation, and delicate chandeliers reflected the late afternoon light like frozen rain. But Nia knew there was more than beauty here. Her grandmother's letter had hinted at something hidden, something powerful, and she was determined to find it. It didn't take long. Behind a large bookshelf in the library, she found a narrow door cleverly concealed. Her hands trembled as she pushed it open, revealing a small room lined with shelves of dusty ledgers, stacks of papers, and bound letters. She sifted through them, her fingers tracing the careful handwriting of generations past. There were financial documents, property deeds, and letters that clearly outlined her family's legacy. One envelope, sealed with an old wax stamp, bore her grandmother's name and a message written just for her. As she read it, the words confirmed everything she had hoped. The mansion, the lands, and the investments were hers. Tay had no claim, no knowledge, no power here. The discovery hit her in waves, shock, relief, and a quiet thrill. Years of doubt and humiliation began to fade, replaced by a sense of ownership, of control, and of justice. She realized that Tay's arrogance had blinded him. He had assumed she was powerless, that she would always bend to his will. But here, in the heart of her family's legacy, Nia held all the cards. She could feel the mansion responding to her presence, the creak of the floors and the whisper of the wind seeming almost like acknowledgement that she belonged. Every hidden room she explored, every document she uncovered, strengthened her resolve. The mansion was more than stone and wood. It was a symbol of everything she had sacrificed and a reminder of the strength she carried inside her. Tay's betrayal had been painful, but it had led her here, to a place where her power was tangible, undeniable. She smiled faintly, clutching a stack of letters to her chest. This was hers, all of it, and no one could take it from her. Not him, not anyone. Nia finally stepped back into the main hall, her head held high. The storm she had endured outside seemed far away now, replaced by a new energy, a sense of purpose that made her heart beat with confidence. The mansion had revealed its secrets, and with them came her power. The mansion's doors slammed open, and Tay stormed in, rain dripping from his hair and clothes, his face red with anger. He had imagined this moment countless times, finding Nia broken, humiliated, begging for forgiveness. Instead, he was met with silence, the kind that carried quiet strength. Nia stood in the grand hall, her coat still damp, her hair clinging to her face, but her eyes were steady, calm, unshakable. "Where do you think you're going?" he demanded, voice sharp, echoing through the vast space. His anger was raw, his movements sharp and desperate, as if the walls themselves were mocking him. Nia didn't flinch. She had rehearsed this in her mind, but nothing could have prepared her for the satisfaction of seeing the truth reflected in his eyes as she took a deep breath and began walking through the mansion. She led him through room after room, each step deliberate, each gesture showing confidence. Then she pulled out the documents she had discovered, property deeds, letters from her grandmother, financial records that outlined her rightful ownership of the mansion. She held them out calmly, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "This is mine," she said softly, letting the words carry the weight of truth. Tay's mouth opened, then closed, words failing him. His arrogance, the same arrogance that had once made him think he could control her, faltered. His eyes darted to the papers, scanning them, but comprehension was slow. Each document confirmed what he had refused to believe. He had no claim here, no power, no right to this house, and no way to dictate her life. The shock on his face was unmistakable, a mix of disbelief, anger, and fear. Nia walked past him, leaving him in the hall, holding the evidence of her independence in her hands. She didn't shout, she didn't plead, she didn't argue. There was no need. The mansion, the letters, the ledgers, and her grandmother's wisdom spoke louder than any words. Tay realized, perhaps for the first time, that his control had ended, and that Nia was no longer the woman he could bully or manipulate. She stopped in the center of the hall, letting the silence settle between them. The rain outside had slowed to a soft drizzle, but inside, the tension was thick. Tay's fury had lost its edge, replaced by stunned confusion. Nia's calm authority, her quiet strength, and the undeniable proof of her claim had flipped the entire dynamic. He could not undo what she now held, and he could not take from her what had always belonged to her. For the first time, Nia felt the full weight of her victory. She had faced him unbroken, and in doing so, she had claimed not just a mansion, but her dignity, her power, and her future. Tay's disbelief lingered, but Nia didn't need to speak another word. The confrontation had ended, and the balance of power had shifted forever. Nia had just finished showing Tay the documents when she heard voices outside, laughter, footsteps, and the shuffle of people approaching. At first, she hesitated, unsure who could be arriving, but then the doors swung open, and one by one, familiar faces stepped inside. Her friends, the ones who had quietly stood by her over the years, and even distant relatives she hadn't seen in ages, walked through the grand hall, their expressions a mix of relief, pride, and determination. "Tay doesn't get to decide our loyalty," one of her cousins said firmly, stepping forward. "We stand with Nia." Others nodded, some carrying envelopes, others just offering silent support. Their presence was a reminder of all the people who had loved her, who had seen her dedication and her strength long before she realized it herself. Tay's shoulders tensed, his face twisting in disbelief. He had always assumed he could isolate her, make her feel powerless, keep everyone else out of their affairs. But here they were, a crowd of allies she hadn't even called, people who had quietly watched, waited, and now chose to rally around her. Even the neighbors, the same ones who had peeked from their windows the night she had been thrown out, began to gather at the mansion gates. Some came cautiously, unsure at first, but when they saw her standing strong, documents in hand, they stepped forward. Whispers turned into words of support, encouragement, and admiration. "She's right," one neighbor said. "This is her home. She's been wronged, and now she's claiming what's hers." Nia felt a warmth spread through her chest as she looked around. For the first time in weeks, she realized that the world hadn't abandoned her. People cared, and they had been waiting for her courage to match the truth. She didn't feel alone anymore. She felt surrounded by a network of people who believed in her, who recognized the injustice she had endured, and who were ready to stand with her against anyone who tried to take it away. Tay's face darkened as he looked at the crowd, the arrogance in his eyes faltering. He had underestimated the power of connection, of loyalty, and of those who refused to bow to his whims. Every person in that hall was a reminder that Nia had allies, and that no amount of fury or intimidation could reverse the truth she held. Nia took a deep breath and smiled faintly, not out of arrogance, but out of quiet satisfaction. She had been betrayed, humiliated, and cast aside, yet here she stood, supported by people who mattered. Their presence made her feel stronger, more certain that she could face whatever came next. Together, they formed a shield of solidarity around her, proving that justice wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a movement, a recognition of right over wrong. For the first time in a long time, Nia felt unstoppable. She had allies, she had truth on her side, and most importantly, she had herself. Nia stood in the mansion's main hall, surrounded by friends, relatives, and neighbors who had come to support her. For the first time, she felt the full weight of her authority and the power that had always been hers. Tay, once so confident, now looked lost, his fury replaced by confusion and fear. She had already shown him the documents proving her ownership, but now it was time to make it official, to turn the tables completely. She walked to the front doors, her steps steady, and pressed a button on the intercom system. The gates closed with a heavy clang, locking Tay out. His eyes widened in shock as he rushed forward, banging on the metal bars, shouting her name, demanding entry. But Nia didn't hesitate. She felt no pity, only clarity. The man who had thought he could control her, manipulate her, and strip her of her dignity now had no power at all. Turning back inside, Nia began reorganizing the mansion's finance. She went through the ledgers, bank accounts, and legal documents, transferring assets, securing investments, and making sure that Tay's previous manipulations could never affect her again. Every action she took was precise, deliberate, and powerful. It wasn't just about money. It was about independence, control, and finally claiming the life she had worked for and deserved. As she moved through the rooms, giving instructions to the people who had come to help, Nia felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Tay paced outside, shouting futile threats, but the mansion was hers now in every sense, legal, financial, and symbolic. His arrogance, which had once seemed endless, was gone, replaced by helplessness. He realized that the woman he had tried to belittle was unstoppable when she embraced her own strength. Nia paused in the library, holding a stack of important documents, and looked around the mansion. Each room, each hallway, each hidden corner now reflected her effort, her legacy, and her determination. The betrayal she had endured, the humiliation she had suffered, and the nights she had spent questioning her worth, all of it had led her to this moment. She wasn't just reclaiming property, she was reclaiming her life. Outside, the rain had stopped completely, and the air felt lighter, almost celebratory. Nia could hear Tay's frustrated shouts fade as he walked away, finally realizing he had no control here. Inside, she smiled quietly to herself. She had not only survived the storm, but had risen above it, stronger, smarter, and more confident than ever. By the time the sun began to peek through the clouds, Nia had turned her life around completely. She had locked out betrayal, reorganized her future, and claimed the power that had always been hers. Tay was no longer a threat. She had finally taken control, and for the first time in a long time, everything felt right. Word of Nia's victory spread quickly through Lusaka. At first, people whispered in small circles, neighbors, friends, and acquaintances passing the story along like a secret too good to keep. Soon, the news reached wider circles. The markets, the offices, even the local cafes where people gathered to catch up on the latest gossip. But unlike the rumors Tay had tried to spread about her in the past, this news wasn't rooted in fear or jealousy. It was admiration. People were talking about her courage, her determination, and the way she had reclaimed what was rightfully hers. Everywhere she went, Nia felt the shift. Neighbors who had once watched silently when she was humiliated now greeted her with smiles and nods of respect. "You handled that so well," one woman said, clutching Nia's hand. "We all knew you were strong, but this is something else." Even those who had doubted her, or who had been skeptical of her grandmother's letters, began to see the truth. They saw that Nia had not only endured betrayal, but had turned it into power, and her resilience inspired everyone who heard her story. Tay, on the other hand, tried to fight back. He called people, shared half-truths, and whispered his own version of events, hoping to sully her reputation. But it didn't work. The evidence was too clear, and Nia's strength too visible. People had seen her hold her head high, take control of her inheritance, and face him without fear. Her dignity, courage, and rightful claim spoke louder than any gossip he could spread. With every lie he told, more people saw the contrast between his arrogance and her composure. The local community began to celebrate her quietly, telling the story of the woman who had refused to be broken. It wasn't about money or property. It was about justice, fairness, and the power of self-belief. Nia's triumph became a kind of legend, a story parents told their children, a story friends shared over coffee, a story that reminded everyone that strength often comes quietly but shows up when it matters most. Even in her own heart, Nia felt vindicated. She had endured betrayal, humiliation, and doubt, yet she had emerged stronger than ever. She didn't need approval or applause, but seeing the respect she had earned made the journey all the more meaningful. Every smile, every nod, every whispered word of encouragement reminded her that she had not only claimed her inheritance, but had claimed her place in the world, on her own terms. By the time the story had fully spread through Lusaka, Nia's life had changed completely. She was no longer the woman cast out into the rain, powerless and alone. She was recognized, respected, and admired. Her past humiliation had become public proof of her strength, and her present victory was a promise of what she could accomplish. Tay's attempts at revenge were futile, and Nia finally understood that true power was not in wealth alone, but in resilience, courage, and the unwavering belief in oneself. Nia stepped out onto the mansion balcony, the cool evening air brushing her face. Rain still dripped from the eaves, forming tiny streams that splashed into the garden below. She wrapped her arms around herself, not from cold, but from the quiet satisfaction that filled her chest. The city of Kitwe stretched out before her, streets glistening under the fading light, and for the first time in months, she felt completely at peace. Looking out over the property, Nia thought about how far she had come. Just weeks ago, she had been cast out into the storm, humiliated and betrayed. Now she stood here victorious, having reclaimed not only her family's mansion but her dignity, her confidence, and her future. Every step of the journey, every tear, every doubt, every moment of fear, had led her to this. She had turned humiliation into triumph and betrayal into opportunity, proving to herself and to the world that strength comes from within. The mansion no longer felt like just walls and furniture. It was more than a building. It was her legacy, a symbol of resilience, courage, and perseverance. She could feel her grandmother's presence in every room, in every hidden corner she had discovered, as if Amina had known that Nia would rise, that she would claim what was always hers. The rain that had once seemed harsh and punishing now felt like a cleansing, washing away the past and leaving only clarity, purpose, and hope. Nia took a deep breath, letting the cool air fill her lungs. She smiled faintly, feeling stronger than ever before. Life had tested her, and she had passed. She realized that true power wasn't about wealth, status, or control. It was about believing in oneself and never giving up, no matter how dark the storm. The mansion was hers, yes, but more importantly, her future was hers. And now, she was ready for whatever came next.